begin.
Why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll let people wander in as they will. Welcome to the DFW DataViz group. This is your group, so we're open to suggestions for how we can run this differently, different speakers you'd like to see. I've been trying to find as many people locally as I can so that we're not paying travel expenses for someone to come in. I've got lots of people who would love to fly in, but we don't have the money to fly in and do that. We've got a great panel for you tonight. If you're not on the Wi-Fi, SMU guest is the Wi-Fi, and you've got to log in, give it your email address, and it's going to email you a password if you want to get on. And if you're not already part of our group, this bit.ly link to DFW DataViz is our homepage for the meetup group. And please join the group if you haven't already. Our meetups so far are sponsored by Infographic, which is my company, which we do infographic and data visualization design. And VizMe, if you're not familiar with it, is an online tool for, they do DataViz, infographics, presentations, banners, all in the cloud, and they've got an enterprise tool and a free tool you can try out as an individual. And of course, SMU is providing our space every month as we go. I'll introduce Mary Stahl over here in the corner. Don't look behind the curtain over here. It's going to be an experiment for us. She's going to graphically record the event tonight so we can take pictures and have a visual summary of the discussion that went on tonight. The group's goals are centered around a local group in the DFW area for networking, a place where we can discover design tools and do workshops, have guest speakers come in and learn best practices, and certainly just engage people, because I've been speaking at groups, DataViz groups all over the country, and we just don't have one here at DFW, which is why I started this one up. And they're huge. I mean, I've talked to groups that have 2,000 members and had 250 people show up for an event. So we can really build a community here because we've really got a huge population, a lot of people doing DataViz in this area. As part of the group, every time, I want to open it up to the floor for anybody who's in the moment trying to hire somebody in DataViz, infographics, web coding, social media. Anybody got any open positions they want to share with the group? No? Anybody looking for a position and you want to raise your hand and say you're looking for a position and share your information with the group as well? Excellent. Everybody's doing great. Yeah.
Solid group.
Okay. For your calendars, our next event is already scheduled. March 25th, Eric Swain is going to talk about the science of storytelling and digital storytelling. And we are going to be back at Plano, right? We're going to be back at the SMU campus in Plano on March 25th. So that event is already on the meetup site where you can register for the event and get all the mailings and information that we send out. There also are other groups outside of ours, so I open this up. I know of a couple because I'm going to do a couple more talks in the next couple months. This is the Association for Talent Development over at Fort Worth, where I'm going to talk about innovative ways companies are using infographics on March 5th. And March 26th, I'm going to talk to the Dallas User Interaction Meetup group and talk about design tools and tips for DataViz and infographics. Any other meetups, meetings, groups coming up that you'd like to invite everybody to?
Yeah, I have one. I'm with the Dallas Forward Search Engine Marketing Association, and if anybody's interested in online reputation, our next meeting is coming up. I'm going to look it up real quick. But we meet in Richardson, and if you want to come for a meeting, let me know and we'll get you in.
Anybody else? Any other meetups, any other meetings, presentations you know of that you want to share coming up?
Starting Monday through Friday next week is Dallas Startup Week. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but you can get a all-week pass for free. There's lots of wonderful stuff going on. It looks like it's all downtown.
What is Dallas Startup Week for startup companies?
This is the first time ever. There was a Dallas Startup Weekend that was back in November, and I'm not involved with it, so I can't give you an accurate description. But if you go to dallas.startupweek.co, you can look at the full schedule. So there's stuff going on all day and then happy hours each evening.
There's also an excellent write-up of what's going to be happening in the Dallas Morning News.
There you go. I bet they have the link too.
DallasNews.com and search for Dallas Startup Week and CHO.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you. For information's sake, I'm going to start teaching an infographics and data visualization design class at SMU Continuing in Professional Education from April 7th to March 19th. There's a sheet somewhere floating around. Everybody's got a sheet for the class. The times are wrong, but it's the sheet. We're going to talk about telling stories and some of the tools and design, structuring information, being able to then publish that and share your infographic or data visualization online. For this group, there's a $50 discount code, MUDV. If you register, you can get $50 off the registration price. And this little bit.ly link down here is a short way to get to the class page. I also know, Hetty, you want to stand up and talk about your class?
Hi, I'm Hetty Tabor. I'm actually new to SMU, but I'm the director of the Masters of Science in Business Analytics program, a new program that we started this year. It's all around business analytics. One of the classes I teach that starts for the first time in March, so it's a brand new class for SMU. It's called data visualization, so it's really how to build data visualization. So it's not open to the public, but if you want to come and take the MSBA course and get a master's in business analytics, or you know somebody who wants to, you can have them get in touch with me. We've got a great course, starts again in August, so it's a one-year class, or one-year program.
That's
one-year
a long class. This class lasts forever.
Do you have the PyData info with you?
Actually, I don't. I didn't think to bring it, but you're right. If you'd like to say
Well,
something.
my phone died, so I don't remember what any of the exact dates and times are. If you go to pydata.org, pydata.org, we are putting together in April a conference here in Dallas of people who do data and data-related work in the Python programming language. And we are currently taking proposals from speakers, and it's going to be awesome.
And being held at SMU.
And it's being held
Oh, really?
here
At Plano.
Plano.
Okay. Okay. Just worth mentioning, the big Design Dallas conference in September, their super early bird registration pricing is through March. But we as a meetup group have an additional 20% off if you use the code DataViz. So if you have any interest or have gone to the Big D conference before and are willing to jump on, you can get an extra 20% off with DataViz. And that's at bigdesigndallas.com. And then I will turn it over to you, Rob.
Okay, great.
Rob Schneider is going to be our moderator tonight from the Dallas Business Journal, but I'm going to let you do your own and their introductions.
Okay, great. I work currently at the Dallas Business Journal. But previous to that, I worked at the Dallas Morning News and worked with all three of these people. So I thought instead of talking, I could just get really smart people to talk about stuff, and then I wouldn't have to do it. I don't mind talking. That's not the problem necessarily.
No,
I do love talking. I will say that I think the key kind of this way. So, I don't want to sit on the boat. It's just fun to watch me. Anyway, so the key differentiation for me is for this, I think, will be news, and I think you'll see that we'll be talking a lot of different methods, and we'll be talking about a lot of different things that we do. But with news in mind, we're probably using the same tools. But I think I really hope happens for this is we have a pretty loose structure. We have a lot of great content, and we have a lot of really smart people. But what I really hope is that when we show an example, there's a question about how did you do that? Why did you do it that way? What about this way? What did you think about that? Because these guys are really, really smart and they'll be able to talk with a lot of smart words about that stuff. So I want this to be a conversation. I hope that's what this is. I think we'll have time at the end for questions, but I urge you just to raise your hand in the middle of this and just turn this into kind of the direction of the discussion that you guys want to do. So one of the organizations that I urge you to take a look at is SND.org, and it's the Society for News Design. We just finished our digital competition. We're actually doing our print competition. The differentiation for this organization, there are a lot of design organizations, and there are a lot of great design organizations. This is an international design organization. So we're not only representing people from the United States, we're representing the phenomenal design that happens in South America and Europe, especially England, the Middle East is really a hotbed. I mean, print newspapers in other parts of the world are really hot right now. I mean, a lot of times they're funded by governments. There's a lot of negatives with that. The positive is profit margin doesn't really matter. So you can really do a lot of, you can worry about the journalism, worry about doing great work, and not necessarily worry about keeping investors happy. So, in China as well as really in India as well, big burgeoning regions and South Africa and a lot of parts of Africa as well. So the international mission of that is really important and interesting, and you can learn a lot about that. And I think a lot of the fundamental design stuff we're going to talk about work for print, work for anything. So these are the three people we're going to talk to. The person walking over to get some food or something is Michael Hogue. And I worked with Michael Hogue since 2003 at the Dallas Morning News, and did the best work of my career with him. The great thing I like about Michael is he is a really talented artist. He's not just a talented artist in Photoshop or drawing on the computer sense. You could ask him to, you could probably pay him to do a painting, and he would do that for you. He's really, really talented. That'd be one thing, that'd be enough. But in 2005, he said, you know what, I want to learn to do graphics. And so he just started learning to do graphics. And one of the first graphics he worked on, the first graphic he worked on, was entered in this competition that'll happen in a couple of weeks, so Malofiej in Spain. And it's an international graphics competition. Won. The first graphic he did, he just won an international award. So he's really, really talented. And the great thing about Michael is he always wants to get better. So it's not just a couple of years ago he really wanted to start doing digital things. And so you'll see him try to take what he was doing in the print newspaper and then find a digital component. And I think increasingly probably do things digitally, and then they might get. So that's really impressive. And so he'll be talking in a second. To his left, to his right actually, is John Hancock, who I also work with the Dallas Morning News, and John is probably one of the hardest workers I've ever been a part of. Best hire I ever made. He was a sports designer and finally wanted to do something different, so really has taught himself most of the digital coding and digital work, and is going to show some examples of that, and I think is constantly learning, constantly trying to do things in a different way, and try to find the best way to do things. And then to John's right is Daniel Lathrop, and Daniel is a data guru and really smart. Whenever you're in a room with Daniel, you're immediately aware that he's operating in like so if I'm OS 10.9, like he's like 12.3 somehow, he's already up there, like he's operating on a higher plane. The thing, and I've met a lot of data people that are really, really smart and can talk a fantastic game. The thing that is different about Daniel is he's a really hard worker, and it not only talks game, but then finds a way to actually get it done. I mean, because we all have great ideas. I mean, I could give you 10 great ideas right now, but it would take a lot of work to do them, and I probably won't do them. Daniel will do them. And so, eventually, yeah, maybe not tomorrow. But anyway, so these are great people, and so I just want this to be a discussion. I think just talking about the process and talking about why and what we do is that. So with that, I'll bring it back.
Thank you, Rob. This guy right here is the best designer I've ever met. He taught me so much about
Really
design,
fast too.
and he can't work a laptop.
Oh, swipe. Is it
Bottom left
one
corner.
that hates the swipe?
I hate to swipe too.
Hit the bottom left corner. There you go.
Yes.
You there. So where are we at? So first thing we're going to look at is a site that really Daniel put together the nuts and bolts for. Well, this is not it.
Well, no,
Hold on.
no, it's doing it now.
Yeah.
It did.
Oh.
It did.
I was going to do it first.
Okay, let's go. It's a little further down.
There we go. So we had this idea to have a site that kind of showcases some of our most fun infographics, illustrations, that kind of thing, informative stuff. And so I came to Daniel and said I'd like to have something where we could, post a new graphic every day and just do some of the things that we want to do, some of the things that are a little more fun. And here's something that I put together. A lot of the stuff and this is a page that John designed actually. A lot of the stuff that I do, as Rob said, is designed really for print and then I'll turn it into an interactive. So I'll take the EPS file that I did in Illustrator and take it into a program that I use a lot. It's called ThingLink. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this kind of thing. These guys have the big coding brain. I do not. I wish my brain worked that way, but it doesn't. When I start getting into coding, it just really kind of sucks the life out of my brain. I like to create illustrations and designs and informational graphics like that. And luckily, I work with really smart guys who do that kind of thing. So we kind of play on each other's strengths. And I've found some things like this that you can just take a PNG, turn your EPS file into a PNG, and little rollovers that can tell a story. Kind of the sweet spot for things like this are photo designs. It's not really good for charts and that type of thing, but it's a really good thing to show, to tell a story and just have quick little rollovers. And
Michael, talk about the benefit of why you need to do it really fast.
Well, you know, newspapers, we've lost a lot of staff. And when I got hired, we had 5 people that did nothing but illustrations 10 years ago. And now we're down to a staff of a total of 5 people. I think we had 20 people on our graphics staff 10 years ago, and now we're down to about 5. So we're trying to find ways to really cross-pollinate with the extra work that we've got with digital, along with the paper that we still need to produce. So tools like this and some other tools that I'll talk about here in a little bit really kind of speed this process up for me, a guy that doesn't do coding. But with graphics, I think, you know, anytime you can have a little bit of fun. This is a story about how the Texas Rangers went from a World Series team to a last place team in a year. And it goes through the pitching, the players, the transaction, the politics, and as you go down here, part of it is because their star pitcher, Derek Holland, tripped over his dog. So then at the very bottom, we got the dog on it. Down here. But about half of our traffic now is in mobile, so a graphic like this is not going to work in mobile. It's too big. So John came up with a little code that we can spit out where we can just simply create this in a version like this for the desktop, and then when you reduce the screen size, it automatically goes down to, if I can grab this screen here, you'll be able to see that with the responsive code that John created for me, it goes down to a mobile size. Where is it? Trust me, it works. I haven't even looked at this one in this version yet. Anyway, it works. Believe me, I'll show you another version of the responsive code. But that's a key thing. That's what we all talk about. If we're going to create a graphic that is going to go online, it has to work on mobile, or we're just not going to put it up all the time. And lost it.
It's spinning.
That's why it wasn't working.
What was the name of the program again that can do the rollovers?
It's called ThingLink.
ThingLink?
Yeah, ThingLink. And it's a free program. When you sign up for it, you can use it for free. Basically, you just create the thing. It spits out an embed code. It's responsive. Works on mobile. What they'll do is they'll let you use it for free for a year, and then they'll start charging you for it. But it really works well for, you know, little graphics like this. Bad connection here, sorry. So while we're waiting on this, so how many of you folks are professional graphic designers? Quite a few. Students? No students? I expected there to be quite a few students. What about other folks? What are you guys interested in infographics for?
Displaying really complex information in business. Like
What's it for? What's the use for?
Things I use it for would be things like looking at customer behavior across time. It's very difficult to create like a dashboard report for a business person. So things like a directed flow of, for something like that would be a good example.
Use it like an analytical tool, basically.
I've used Tableau. I've been starting to learn some of the D3.js stuff.
Yeah, D3 is really powerful, and Daniel here is really good at D3.
Yeah.
Do some amazing
It
things.
used to be all Excel type stuff. Not trying to. Stuff is too complicated when you're dealing with marketing, account, finance, customer service. Trying to tell a story across all companies too complicated without visuals.
Well, this is going to move super slow here. But the vast majority of what we do are just static graphics. We kick out thousands of static graphics every year. And I'm over a staff of 5 guys, and we've got 3 of us really do nothing but just crank out thousands of static graphics, maps, charts, and that kind of thing for the newspaper, and put them online every year. And I really would like to show you some of this stuff. Let's try this again. So you got any good jokes?
Got a lot of haiku.
Michael, what's your normal timeline? How long do you have from, hey, we need a graphic to it's live?
Depends on the complexity, but something like this, for example, this was a story about Dirk and how he's had more all-star appearances than pretty much anyone. And it's get it done in about 4 hours, 5 hours for the print version and for this thing, and that's about the time frame. So here's another thing ThingLink can do. You can add photos to it, roll across, compare different players to where Dirk stands. It's pretty amazing how great Dirk is after he's some skinny 19-year-old guy that we thought would be nothing. Another nice little feature that Daniel added to the site is there's a little read more tab up here, so we can kind of get into our archives and look at other related stories on our website.
So under the hood, what's involved in doing all that stuff?
Which part of all that stuff?
Are you talking about the
like
website?
You've got data, right? You've got data, and you have to take that data and you need to map it into the various graphics and then of course it has to map it to the design that he's putting together.
So you're talking about this, what's under the hood of this,
Right.
okay. So what we have here is, it started out as an Illustrator graphic, put the photo in, make the chart in Illustrator, and I
Does
actually,
everybody know what Illustrator is?
in Adobe Illustrator. And, the print version of this has all that type on it. It has little
You're talking
photographs on it.
about Adobe Illustrator, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So then I strip all the type off, all the extra type off of the Adobe Illustrator file, and make a PNG file of that. Import that into ThingLink, and then I've just got an Excel spreadsheet over here, or a Word document, and I open this up in ThingLink, and on each one of these bars, you just have to manually create a little box that takes about a second, and then you copy and paste the info in there, and copy and paste a little link to the photograph you see there, and it's done. So the whole thing to make this chart itself with the info in it probably took about 30 minutes. Something along those lines.
So there's no, in the back end, there's no live database or
There's absolutely no coding in this, which is the only reason I can't do it.
We're going to get to things that have coding on there too. I think it's a mix of that. And I think there's various reasons for that. I think Michael's a good example of trying to do more with less, basically, and trying to think things that would take a lot more time to code and try to find a quick way to get there.
Yeah, and anytime we're talking about complex data visualizations that are interactive, these are the guys that take care of that stuff. And they'll have some good examples of that later. Then this kind of stuff is more of a sweet spot for illustrations, for that type of thing. Anything that, if you want to look at Richard Linklater's movies and what our movie critic graded each one of his movies, then this was done for print in Adobe Illustrator. Just drag it into this program, and you can look at what he graded Boyhood in this little commentary for each one of Linklater's movies.
I've got an interaction question. How do those rollovers work on touchscreen? Or do they?
You touch it and it pops up.
Oh, okay.
And they have a little close thing on it that you can hit to close it if you wish, but if you touch on another one, it automatically disappears. So they work really well on mobile. Now, something like this Dirk thing right here, on mobile it works, but it's a little more clunky on mobile when you have that many points. But with any interactive graphic that has that many points in mobile, it's going to be a little bit complicated.
So it only works on mobile because of Daniel's code, because you were saying on Finland.
Oh, no. Daniel designed the document, this page. Daniel is the nuts and bolts of the whole page. ThingLink has its own.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. It does its own.
But he was talking earlier about turning a page into something responsive that will work on mobile. That was what John was.
And that's basically just.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think what Michael does is he makes basically two versions of this. He makes one that works well on the desktop and one that's kind of sized for mobile. And then it's just a CSS media query and some JavaScript that switches out the source file based on the screen size. So if your screen size is below a certain size, the script goes in and grabs the smaller mobile version of his thing and the file displays that.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
I thought like he was saying on desktop, it works like when you roll over, it pops up, but on mobile it doesn't. So.
No, it works on mobile too. And this is an example too. This is a pretty prime example of something that just would not work on mobile. You go in here and click
way too small.
In Chicago, and you're going to get Milwaukee or whatever, Green Bay. So it works really well on the desktop. But so the responsive code that John gave me, I created, like he said, a separate, smaller version of this, where instead of showing all 32 teams that are in the NFL, you show the top 5 and bottom 5. So then you can go in and touch them up there, and it works really well.
And so you talked about this taking 4 hours, but do you have to run it by the editor? Do you have to get them a sketch? This is what I'm thinking. And where I'm coming from is I'm doing an infographic for AT&T's blog, and I send in the sketch, then it takes them 3 days to get back to me. Oh, Gladys, but the blog is going up on Friday. Well, that's nice, but you're not getting back to me until Thursday morning. So it's this back and forth, and the editorial part almost becomes like, ay, Dios mío, why?
Well, yeah, that's a big problem, especially when anytime I do work for advertising, that's what happens. It's much better. I enjoy editorial so much more. Anytime there's advertising, you got 10 people that have to give you approval, and you wait forever, and everybody's always got to have a voice, so somebody's got to justify their job and say, no, this needs to be changed to this, and blah, blah, blah. Happens all the time in ads. At the newspaper, it's great because deadlines are like this. So you get a project, you have an idea, you roll with it, and we've been there long enough and we've gained the respect of the editors where they pretty much say, here you go, do what you want to do.
What story was that tied to?
This was something that I actually did just for online only.
Oh, okay.
And but then we ended up running it in print too, as a standalone graphic, because the Cowboys were #1 and all this stuff. And
So, for example, like that Richard Linkletter probably was like a Sunday feature story, and that illustration was in the Sunday feature section, and then he turned it into a graphic.
Yeah, but more and more what's happening too is some of these reporters and writers are coming to us saying, hey, I've got a really good interactive idea, something we can do online, and then we produce that, and it ends up making its way into the paper as a secondary thing. That never used to happen, but in the last year or two, that happens a lot more often. How are we doing on time? Great. Okay.
Keep going, man.
Somebody want to see a video?
Why don't you? Why don't you do the little work?
What? Which one?
The CJ Wilson.
Is it on here?
It's on. I'm sorry. I'll find it. Keep up.
So I like to do animations from time to time too. And, what I really like to do more than anything probably is just get a sketchbook and go out and talk to folks. I've done quite a few pages like this where I'll do kind of, it almost looks like a comic treatment but more realistic drawings. And went to the Super Bowl with this little 11-year-old reporter and followed him around while he interviewed all the players and just draw all that stuff. And a lot of examples like that. And I'd say that probably the amount of work that I do in the sketchbook style is like a real fraction of a percent of what I do, but the reader response has been like at least 50% of everything I've ever done is that stuff. So I really like to do that kind of stuff. And this is kind of that style a little bit as an animation. This is C.J. Wilson. I don't know how many of you guys know the Rangers and C.J. Wilson, and he's pretty well known as a big D-bag, and
So one thing I was going to throw in, a big differentiator too, is content. What the Dallas Morning News produces every day, a lot of great content, and so we're trying to find a way to do that. And this is actually a partnership. This started with a partnership with The Ticket, and they had audio. This was like a bit they ran on the radio, and then you got basically animated.
yeah, he's a big bragger, C.J. Wilson. He really likes himself a whole lot. And so they did this bragging montage of C.J. Wilson, and I heard it on the radio, and it just made me laugh. So I called him and asked him if we could partner up, and it was 5 minutes worth of audio, and we cut it down to 2 minutes and animated it. And here it is. I don't know if we have sound.
Yeah, that's
I don't really follow what's going on unless I get it through Twitter. I think Twitter is sort of, it's fun, but for me it's mostly
kind of crude animation, but
my own interest. Yeah, not to brag, but I have a very large TV at home. It's literally bigger than my arm span, so it's got to be 72 inches or something like that. 75 inches. It's very large. If you can get a bigger TV, you're going to get a bigger TV. It's just like the way you do it. I don't really watch a lot of TV. I watch Formula 1 racing, I watch Shark Week. I remember I sat down and watched TV at one point in November, and since then I haven't watched any TV for any reason at all. It was the best TV show ever, in my opinion. You can read my blog about that on UpToLefty.com. I did a 3-parter on the finale. Right now I'm just reading a lot of scripts because I'm trying to make use of my film and television education and try to write some stuff. I have some really good ideas. I think this off-season that I'll put computer and keyboard to final draft and try to produce something. I have a action movie that I'm writing. I have a comedy that I'm writing right now. I have a TV show that's kind of like a dramatic comedy. There's like a samurai proverb where you can over-sharpen your knife and it eventually gets dull. I told the guy to wash his mouth. That was soap yesterday. I haven't been in a situation where anybody tried to throw a punch at me or whatever since I was at a kill switch engaged concert in Riverside a couple years ago. I was doing football lifts and everything, but I was like, whoa, So it was great. I was really happy. I started reading more books on, marathon running and endurance training and stuff like that. I do that cryo sauna thing. I did that today. Froze in my underwear.
right, okay.
That was cool. Nutrition license and all sorts of stuff. How do I get my concealed handgun license? I just want to have as many licenses as possible. Car license, commercial driver license, concealed handgun license. I'm going to have a Navy pilot's license one day. Commercial license, boat license, fishing license, hunting license, whatever. I just think it'd be kind of cool to be certified to do all this really cool stuff.
Anyway, you get the idea.
Licenses that I can turn off. Beacher is this club, which is at the Roosevelt Hotel. It's amazing. When you go there, you're sitting next to Leonardo DiCaprio, Kim Kardashian, and Demi Moore. At some point, there will be video of me dancing that can hit the web. I had to sleep last night at a decent hour, and everybody else got.
There we go.
Alright, so that's great.
So it's not the kind of stuff that you'd see in the newspaper. You just have fun every once in a while. They let us do that, which is kind of cool.
So we'll kind of meld this all together, but we'll move on to Daniel and talk about some things that
This actually is a nice segue because it's actually something Michael and I did together. We called this map the jigsaw puzzle. Michael made this. Well, Michael and I made this. I sized all the counties, and then Michael put them back together so that it looked like Texas again.
Based on voters or?
So this is based on population. This is based on population. The reason we didn't use registered voters, I could go into it, but it's not all that interesting. And so these are all, this is done in D3. And then you can click on a county and you can see what the results were for that race in the county, and you can go on the page for every county. And then you can see the results for the governor's race, the others. And then this is all done with D3. One of the things with the jigsaw puzzle is we wanted you to be able to see your county if you knew where your county was. And if your county didn't happen to be one of the very large counties, it could be hard to find. Actually, I had to spend about 30 minutes trying to relocate where we put a county down by San Antonio because this is where my editor's mother lives. she was convinced that her county wasn't on the map, and so I had to go prove to her that it was. Very well. But anyway.
So talk about, so you would have created this shell election night. This wouldn't have been.
No, so we created, so there's a couple of things that went on here. The first is we created this shell we spent the entire month of October, some of September, working on this site. Just making this work.
For the animation,
Just making this work was about at least a week's worth of work. Because making this is really easy, right? If you've ever done any, and making this by hand. Once Michael made this by hand, we didn't know what the election results were going to be, so we couldn't go in and color them all by hand. And as I said, at one point, it took me an hour to figure out where one of the small counties was. That wasn't going to happen. But we also wanted to be able to use this in the paper, which we did. We used a tool called SVG Crowbar that will extract the current state of an SVG graphic on a web page out into a file. And so then I was able to send that on deadline to Michael, who did some additional styling on it and put it in the paper.
Yeah, I think we had it done about 10 minutes before the paper was going to be sent to the press, and Daniel was calmly sitting in his office, and twice I ran across the newsroom like full speed into his office, and he didn't know. He was just all cool. I was in a much bigger hurry. But it worked.
So you do this for content reasons because the Texas election is going to be the
biggest
story,
biggest story.
Year.
Yeah.
But so what did this do in terms of traffic? What did this do in terms
well, in terms of traffic, this actually did very well. So we planned this to run as a standalone, experience. You can go, you can choose which race you want to look at. We have those county pages, and it's responsive, so it actually works on the phone. That took a while. Making you can't get Zoom on the phone. It's very hard. Very hard. Actually, you can because you need to go out. It's part of why we did that.
So
but this was more popular than the most popular story the day after the election.
And so
this was definitely, and this was the most popular thing on our website. So the election was Tuesday. That Wednesday, traffic on it ramped up at about 5 in the morning when we first posted it to Facebook. And then it went, and it was then the lead item on the homepage for most of the day. And like I said, it did much better traffic for reasons that you might be able to guess than our stories explaining the outcome of the election. This is a choose your own adventure, right? What am I interested in? What do I want to know? There's a lot of stories you can tell yourself with this, and we tried to make that happen. In part also by doing some smart contextual information. This was all information that we had.
That's all D3 stuff too.
This is all in D3. Yeah, this whole thing. These are all D3 graphics.
So Daniel, was that all built beforehand, and all you had to do was update the actual results
yes,
to
so
populate?
Yes. So we have these. There's a couple of things. So like this Republican strength graph. You see that caps out at 2012. There's a whole lot. Most of the stuff on this page, all of the data, census data, or other things that we have this all done, with the exception of the results part. And we had fake results in. Before that, randomly generated fake results.
So let me say one thing. So the sweet spot is when you can get something that's great content, you have a great container for it, you're doing great visualization, great journalism behind it, and it generates a lot of page views. There's a lot of things at DallasNews.com that generate a lot of page views that nobody is really very proud of. Frankly, there's a lot of junk content that it'll get. There's a lot of clickbait type of things that'll generate a lot of that stuff. The sweet spot is this, and there's revenue implications for that. I mean, I think that the chief metric that they're still using are page views, and that, you know, so Michael, you do a thing like Cowboys Graphic that goes live on a Sunday night. How many page views do you get for that?
Depends on if they lost. It gets a lot more when they lose because people are really mad.
What was the top one this year?
The top one is about 100,000.
100,000, and then throughout the week, they're going to keep getting on a Monday and everything. Anything Cowboys related will do exceptionally well. And so there's revenue implications for that. But something like this too also helps for the metrics that they really want to try to use, which is uniques, engagement, amount of time spent on site.
Yeah, the average user, let's see, the average mobile user on this, about half the users on this were mobile, about half were desktop. The average mobile user went to 3 pages. So they came to this, and then they actually, which is hard to do, then they actually went two more things deep into it on average. And the average desktop user was, I think, was between 3 and 4 pages that they visited. And we actually discovered that people much more often were getting to the counties by doing this than by doing this. We put analytics on it, so not totally sure what that means, but we put analytics on it in case we wanted to figure it out. And this was definitely a case where, as a news organization, we knew the election was going to be a big thing. We knew it was going to be important. We knew we were going to want to have a smart take on it the day after. And we decided that we were going to try and do that graphically. I mean, the key thing here is, you know, we talked about this, we were brainstorming about this in, August or something. We wanted to tell the story of the election outcome in a way that respected both the geography of the election and the actual result. Because this map is not is an accurate geographical depiction of the election results, but doesn't tell you anything about the actual outcome. Because this map could look very close to the same. You added a couple more counties, and a couple different counties that are all the same size, and the election results would be totally different. This tells you, I think this almost can't show you if there's more blue than red than the Democrat one. If there's more red than blue than the Republican one. It went through this. If turnout was really inconsistent or something, there's a scenario under which this would have still, but pretty much we built this so that whatever the majority of the actual color of the actual filling space was, would be the election. It's a non-contiguous cardiogram.
And I think there's another interesting thing for the journalist, which is accuracy.
Yeah.
And I think that if I had a criticism of a lot of data visualization, I see that the focus is on the cool. You don't take the content and figure out the best way to show the content. You just figure out a cool way to do the content, even though it might distort the content, it might be inaccurate, or even worse, it might be something that people don't understand. I mean, it's just, they might say, the worst thing you can do, and as a criticism of visualization or even design, is somebody looks at it and says it's cool. I don't know what it means. I have no idea what it means. And so I think that seems to be a phenomenon. I hope that it's starting to go away, but it seemed to be that the visualizations were really focusing on what was cool or animated, or they could do all these things, but the content actually wasn't. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if a bar chart will do the job, then use the bar chart. I get pulled into a lot of meetings at the morning news where we're talking about what's a cool thing, and people say, what's a cool thing we could do with this? Like, well, what's the information you're trying to present? What's this? That's a bar chart. Well, but isn't there something else we could do? There is, but it's a bar chart. It should be a bar chart because that's information because bar charts are really good visualization for that kind of information, and people will be able to understand what it is. Now, by the way, please make the bar chart based in 0. Do not, well, couldn't we do, for example, A line chart? It would look more interesting if it were a line chart. Well, it's not a line chart.
You get that a lot, and I've also heard it in a lot of news meetings. We just make it more flashy. And I think that, and I've been guilty of this sometimes too, when you start doing interactives, and they're still, in the history of graphics, they're all still really relatively new, and it's kind of easy to get sucked into wanting to do something that looks a little more flashy, but kind of over that. When a static graphic does the job, do the static graphic.
I had somebody ask me that when I was working at the Washington Post. I said, well, can you shellac the page?
So, I mean, that's for us. And luckily, with colleagues like this, with Rob, I had very good backing on saying those things. They're pretty willing to accept our judgment. Some of the individuals are not happy when the ruling goes against them.
What's really cool is when you look at that, it almost illuminates the data and it helps you maybe find a story.
Yes. Right? Yes. Well, and in fact, if you go through and do this, my story that I really liked about this, if you went through and looked, think about it. Okay. If you went through, there's actually only one of these maps that looks different. It's the map for the lieutenant governor choice. And in that case, Bexar County, San Antonio, was won by the Sedated. It's because she's from there. But it is also, if you go, I discovered, she actually had the highest percentage of any of the Democratic candidates at a whopping 38.7.
But to your point about telling a different story, when we did this, we also have thought of other stories to go with this map.
Yeah.
Do the story on the 10 smallest counties in Texas. Send reporters out there, talk to the folks who live in these small counties.
Yeah.
Who lives there? What are these places? What are the demographics? And get some of the local color of some of these places. So we're talking about doing that type of thing. What are the 10 biggest? What's mystery in between?
Well, and the other thing is because we built this as a reusable graphic, I can take the same JavaScript code that I use for D3, and we can pour lots of different graphics into it, and that not only can we build an interactive presentation around it, but again, because it's coming out as an SVG, we can then take a view of that data and use it in our print product, which is really a key thing for me, I think, because we have these two products, and in a way, the profitable one is the print product, but the one with the biggest audience is the digital product. And so figuring a way to do something, and they also have very distinct audiences, and it's one of the things we discover. So I really like it when we can find things that are going to work for both. It's sort of you talk about responsive web design, sort of think of this as the same way. It's like responsive graphic design. There's the desktop version, and there's the mobile version, and then there's the Dead Trees version.
So let's talk about data reporting, basically, or visualization as a reporting tool.
Okay, so visualization as a reporting tool. We have start test. Yeah. So there's this little thing called school testing. Every student in the States tastes like a bazillion tests. And we're doing a series of stories on this. This visualization, do you not like? It's in Tableau. So this is a graphic that I made with our colleague Troy Oxford. This is in D3, and this is every school district in the state of Texas, and how many STAR tests students either of I think there's 16. Yeah, there's 16 tests. How many they did better on? How many of those individual tests, third grade math or whatever, had been showed a net improvement or a net decrease? And one of the things that we saw is this is 50,000 students there was nobody with any really substantial change in the large school districts. And in fact, this place ended up being the front page story in the paper because we made these kind of charts to determine this and identify it. Like, ooh, who's this?
Yeah.
They're sort of the largest district that improved a lot, and it was the Wiley School District. It ended up being a really interesting story because they actually were doing something different than the other school districts. It was a case where it wasn't one of those like, yeah, we're just great. They had a story to tell about why things had gotten better that actually made a certain amount of sense.
And did you not find that out until you did the graphic?
We didn't find that. No, we didn't until we did the graphic.
So it's Holly or this visualization?
No, actually not. In this case, yeah, I did these with Jeff Weiss. We just went off the reservation. There's playing with star data. Yeah, so that's how we found this district. We were looking at it also in spreadsheets and numbers too, so we would have found it otherwise. But it is the case that when we did find it, we found it. This is how we found it, and one of the values here is I was working with a really smart reporter named Jeff Weiss. Another really smart reporter named Hancock also worked on this project eventually. Jeff knows everything you would ever want to know about star testing. He knows a ton about all of the numbers behind it, what they all mean. What he can't do particularly well is data analysis. There was a lot of data analysis to do if he was going to do it by himself. And so this actually is an online version of the graphic that we created just for the purposes of exploring the data. Our first graphics on this project were created in the R statistical program, and it was a lot of small miniatures visualizing the same thing over and over and getting to see which place had which ones looked different. And I could hand those to Jeff. And Jeff's a smart guy, and he can go look through them and say, that one looks interesting. Let's go find out more about that. And he's off to the races. And in the meantime,
so how did you decide on the format? Did you the first iteration and it didn't look quite right?
This is actually a later in a series. We did an earlier set of stories that was all done with line graphs, essentially. We had a bunch of small miniatures of line graphs. The very first iteration of this was when we went to the school district level. It was done statewide. It was all done with small miniatures of line graphs, and then in the paper we picked out a few, and online we picked out a few to highlight how the reporting project was done on this. When we got to the point where we were going to try and look at school districts and multiple grades, there are, as you can see, a lot of school districts in the state of Texas, and doing that many small miniatures, there were like 16 tests per school, was not was.
They had to figure out the scale.
Yeah, so we had to figure out the scale, and what we decided that the key measure that we were going to think about as we looked at different, and we looked at these in the course of reporting the story, because it wasn't just like, oh, what's the best way we can visualize this? It was, as we were exploring the data, as we were trying to figure it out, we came to the idea that the analysis behind this, there's 16 tests. How many was there an improvement? How many did they fall behind? What was the net change on that? And that gave us, and we felt like that gave us of the many iterations we did, we felt like that gave us a good understanding. In part, we were able to go report out some of these outliers too, and try and find out more. What does it mean? Who is this? Louisville ISD.
So one point I want to bring up, and I want Michael to speak to that as well. So data journalism. One of the there are a lot of really smart people who work with morning news across the country, and one of the problems seems to usually be that they've got so much great data, and they want to show this, and then they want to show this, and they want to show this, and usually best to try to simplify. Because Holly was notorious for trying. She wanted to graph 4 things, and it was always like, how about we just graph 1 thing? How about 1? And so I think that's a good thing
Well,
too.
and
Trying
I
to
will
do
say,
too much.
for example, this is why I skipped right past this one. This is one that Holly did in Tableau, this is too much. This is an these are actually visualizing very much the same thing. And here, all we did is we just showed you the net. And this tried to be, here's how many went up, here's how many stayed the same, and here's how many went down.
You're reducing the cognitive load in your graph because you're adding a spatial, which is easy for people to understand.
Spatial, which is easy for people to understand. Actually giving people this other piece of information that this one doesn't have, which is campus size, because we're using that as an organizational dynamic. One of the things that you see, if you're thinking about it, is that the larger the school district is, the smaller this is, which is what you would expect to see if the changes were all essentially random. If the changes were all essentially random, then you would expect that the smaller the district, the more the random changes would have an effect. And you would have a bell curve like this, which in fact you do.
And it's a really good graphic. I do have a question, and I've tried it on mobile.
I have. If you start it on mobile, you never really get the mouse over because
What's the Tableau one do? Is it just
it's just even up there.
I think it scrolls over.
Yeah. Now this one, I will say this on mobile. This one is pinchable, so you can go out and the thing that happens on mobile is all of a sudden you really just look at the couple of most interesting ones.
You get the 1,000-foot view on mobile, so you can tell kind of the overall pattern of the change. Whereas you're not really losing anything by not being able to find.
Yeah, here, so on mobile, this Tableau one, you see the school name in the district. And then it scrolls over that way.
I want to ask you another question about that because I especially that Tableau one, I'm seeing terrible problems for people who are colorblind. Are you guys running any of this stuff through colorblind checkers and using website colors and that sort of thing for some of these?
No, I think for the most part, the Dallas Morning News has a color palette that doesn't get muddied up like that, and I think it's pretty simple and works really well. The Pressman also works pretty well. It has high contrast, Michael. I think you guys have actually.
That's the first time I've ever even been asked a colorblind question. We should ask Velez.
For those of us in user experience, we deal with that all the time.
Right.
When we're looking at interfaces, I was looking at the map of the Republicans and Democrats with the red and the blue, and even for someone who's not colorblind, when you put it all into the one map, it's really hard to distinguish.
And the screen's a little dark here, but I think you're right.
One thing we do try to do is we try to use different saturation levels, and we try to do. You see these red and greens here; those are very different saturation levels. So you would get in a black and white view. And on this, of course, this also reads pretty much the same way without color.
Right.
Maps are hard. How do I put it? Sometimes when we have choices, we try to do a good job with colorblindness, colors. I know it's something that I think about on things where the color is key, and I know I've had conversations with John about it, so he does so too. But the issue sometimes becomes like with elections, we're kind of stuck with the red and blue thing.
Right.
Like it's if you show people right now, you show people an election map and the results aren't red and blue, people they freak out, and which is a shame because there's no semantic meaning of red and blue on these. For some reason, blue is now Democrats and red is Republicans, but I always think, but what about the Red Scare? Wouldn't the liberal color be red? It just things change over time. But it's kind of a long, complicated.
So I was gonna shift to a couple things that John's gonna talk about, but we can keep going back, and I think everybody can keep talking. But I wanted to bring John up and talk about a couple projects he wanted to talk about. This is an interactive that John did Cowboys season.
This kind of speaks to what Danny was saying. Sometimes all you need is a bar chart. So this was set up to basically when I made this graphic, it was about 4 or 5 weeks into the NFL season, and DeMarco Murray was off to a hot start. He was on pace to basically set the record for rushing yards for any NFL running back in history. And part of the reason I want to talk about this is just the flexibility of your data when you're setting something up. What happened was, as the season went on, Murray had a couple bad games. He got hurt for a game, and he kind of fell off the pace. But he was still on pace to set a record for Cowboys running backs in rushing yards. So kind of halfway through the season, we switched this. This initially was DeMarco Murray and the other 5 all-time NFL rushers. Halfway through the season, we just changed it to Cowboys. And it was just a matter of swapping out the data. This is all fed via a spreadsheet. That's just each week in the season, we would update the numbers that DeMarco Murray had for that week. All the other numbers were static because these guys had already done their season. So it was just a matter of updating Murray's total each week. And then as the season would go on, you would only have the weeks that it happened. You would have the total number that Murray was projected for at the end of the year and what the other guys ended up with. But you can kind of see where Murray stood against the rest of them as the season went on. And that was just kind of to say that when you're thinking about stuff like this, and you think about creating some kind of interactive digital graphic, this isn't the greatest design or anything, but it has the ability to be flexible and to be quickly updated to change your data. Along with the total yards, we also had some of the other ancillary stats that went along with it. The yards that he had for that game, the attempts, the rushing attempts, and the touchdowns.
What's that built in, John?
This was just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This was before I'd started learning D3, so I kind of did this the hard way, where all the JavaScript that I wrote did all the math for me. That's another takeaway from this. If you're going to be doing stuff like this, take the time to learn D3, and you'll do a lot of the hard work for you.
But D3 is so much cooler once you've done it the wrong way. You've done it the hard way a couple of times, then all of a sudden D3 is just a marvelous tool.
So this one was built using D3. And this is just a timeline of all the National College Football Championships that were decided in the DFW Metroplex. This was tied to the championship game that was here this year. But a lot of these were decided way back in the 60s and 70s when they would play the championship game in Cotton Bowl. So E3 does all the scaling for you. It plots out the timeline, and then based on the size of that timeline, it plots out where those dots should fall on that timeline. Since we talked about responsive design and how some of these things look on mobile, when we get down to mobile, that timeline gets really squished and kind of hard to use. So I just replace it with the drop down. It does the same thing.
So how do you do that? You have some JavaScript function that when you get down to a certain size, you swap out.
Yeah, so the thing that the D3 that's pulling in the data here that's plotting these dots, it's also building a drop down. That drop down's hidden on larger displays, and then on smaller displays it's displayed in the timeline's taken away. One other thing I'll show, this was kind of a big story that we had this year that was, if you're a fan of Texas history at all, I suggest reading this. This was a story by Alan Peppert, and it's about 2 guys that were kind of big players in the oil fields in the early 1900s, Clint Murchison and Sid Richardson. and they bought these islands. Each one of them bought Barrier Island next to each other down in the Texas coast. So this is mostly just an interactive design, but one of the things I wanted to show was a tool that we used to kind of show where these guys' houses were down these Barrier Islands, which was Leaflet and Mapbox. Google Maps has kind of something that's kind of the same function. But one of the things that I liked about this was you can decide whether to show kind of the satellite view or street map view. There wasn't really any purpose of showing a street map because you're not driving to these places. You can only, one of them can only reach by airstrip, the other one's a ferry. But one of the tie-ins to the story is that Richardson's house has been kept up by his estate, so it's still really nice, it's beautiful. The Murchison house has kind of gone to sea, basically. It's been battered. Nobody lives there anymore. It's been battered by hurricanes. And one of the nice things when you zoom down into this is you can kind of see how torn up the place is now on the satellite. See, the guys had private airstrips to get there. You kind of tell the house is just kind of the roof's caving in. It's just kind of all falling apart. So, this is, like I said, Leaflet is what's used to kind of plot the spots on the map. Mapbox is the map that builds the tiles in behind it. But you can use those kind of tools to tie in a lot of data. They don't just do points, you can draw shapes on these things that have the same kind of hover effect. So like if you want to display populations of towns or something like that, you can draw various size circles based on towns, or any kind of data that you want to use.
One of the things that you can also do is it will also let you do customized tiles. So you can decide what your street map looks like a little bit more.
Within the Google Maps. Check out Google Maps.
No, in terms of this, you can build your own tiles based on any kind of data that you want as for the underlying tile. So you can use satellite view. You can use OpenStreetMap. You have a lot more fine-grained ability to decide exactly what's going to show up where in sort of a CSS kind of a way.
What's the name of that?
Mapbox.
Oh, Mapbox.
Yeah.
You have any other examples you want to show? So we have more examples to show. We're about out of time. I think we can probably go over, but if there are questions, still plenty of time for that. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So you guys do infographics or visualizations every day, probably keeping tabs on what's going on, what's the new tools. Where do you see the visualizations and infographics going to be in the future? What's the future for infographics? Will they disappear? Something else will replace them? Or are they going more interactive or more animation, or there's more static?
I think we're going to see more video. I think that's one of the places the tools. Video is a really compelling storytelling medium, and I think you're starting to see more and more interesting sort of data visualization being done in the video, and part of that is just the After Effects and some of the other tools are becoming better and better for doing that. And, computing power goes down, and Moore's law goes into effect, and all of a sudden, we can afford to do it.
I agree with that. I think that After Effects and things like that, things will get easier than After Effects. You're going to find technology is always on the move, moving down the road. Interactive graphics, all that thing, it's going to be more and more automated, just like doing animations. But if you're creative, that's what will never change. But to me, graphics will never go. Like, people always want information, and it's the quickest way to get information. And I read a study, and it said that visuals, an image is absorbed into your brain 60,000 times faster than text. So that's any kind of visual ways to tell stories never going to go away.
I think you see it on social media. I mean, I think that that's why for Gen Y and for Gen Z or whatever it's called. My daughter's 14. All she does is Instagram. That's it. She has no other desire to be on any other social media until she's forced to, I guess. But or somebody tells her it's cool. But I think and that's just she's not on Vivo.
I think. I mean, if you look at the sports industry, especially professional sports, analytics is the biggest, most highest thing in sports. It's a whole new field that's been created where these teams before used to rely on scouts and just eyeballs on a player, and now we've had entire departments created within the organization just to analyze data and use that little edge to try to be better than the competition. So,
I mean, visualization. I'm a data guy. I love data. I love numbers. I love crunching numbers. I love writing computer code. But what I was showing you with star stuff, it really is, even for somebody who's immersed in that data, by far the best way to sort through information. So I don't think it's going away. I think the tools are getting better and the tools are getting easier, and that's good. And I wish the tools could get easier faster, so more people could do. Because
right.
More people could do more interesting things. Because because it's the creativity, it's having the vision to know what to look at and to choose, think about what is it that I can, what is it that's important, how can I look at this information in a way that's useful.
What else? What?
Okay, I'm just curious how you guys are feeding D3. Like, do you use a database or use it in a CSV file, or how do you feed D3 data?
I use mostly
JSON?
Well, I'll say this. So in the case of the TextLX project, we actually had two different things going on. We were feeding, a lot of those we were feeding with JSON, or JSON, or JSON. The actual map was being done with a CSV file because I knew that on deadline I was going to have a CSV file, and that's what I was going to be able to dump on. And I didn't want to be dependent on not being able to do that. As it turns out, I actually ended up writing a database that rendered the CSV file. So there's actually, I didn't actually need to do it in a CSV at the end, but in a way, I just put that in there. I did it as a since D3 can do CSV, it was kind of my fail-safe. Like if everything else went wrong, I could go in. There's only 254 counties. I could go in and create the spreadsheet in Excel and go in and put the results in my hand and make it work.
I wish you were smarter.
Yeah, I know.
Some of the stuff that we've done, or that I do, we use JSON, and a lot of times you're working with a reporter who doesn't know anything about code or anything like that, and it's a lot of the projects that we've done, we feed the JSON in through a Google spreadsheet that the reporter can fill out. It spits out the JSON, the web page pulls it in, and it converts it to the data. So it's a lot easier sometimes for somebody that's not technically fluent in code. They can just fill out the spreadsheet that we have.
Well, most of the databases right now, they can serve back to you a JSON object.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, my reasoning, the reason I did it that way is I wanted to, if elections are, and I've done several projects involving elections. Elections are a problem for doing newsroom data visualization on and newsroom work on because they happen because nothing happens for a very long time, and then all of a sudden things happen very quickly, and you have very little time to deal with it because it happens at because the vote doesn't start coming out until the newspaper practically needs to be printed, and so I always tried the reason that I built it on a CSV, it was not only, like, if I got hit by a bus and nobody else knew what was going on, as long as somebody knew where to put that spreadsheet, we could make it work. And because, you know, for us, you know, the election is a thing that happens on a Tuesday, and the election results are a thing that happens on a Wednesday, and after that, it's over, and we're on to something else. And so it can't. There's sort of no room for error, and so a lot of times I'll do things like that where I personally like to use. Close your ears, guys. I like to use the low-tech solution if I possibly can, because it's easy maintenance, and it's more than that. It's easy to fix if something goes wrong, and that's that there's fewer moving parts, and you know, in the case of and that can be very. It can be really. I mean, there's things that you can't do the low-tech way. Like if that visualization were slightly more complicated, there's no way I ever would have tried to build it so it could do a CSV. But I knew that all I was going to really be doing was color coding counties and having a few pieces of results about it. And so I decided it's worth doing the extra hassle of doing this as a CSV.
Okay. Yep. On the tech select thing, I have a story idea that I'll talk to you about afterwards. But
yeah, we love that.
Related to the intellectual property of that application, Michael, is it possible to turn your department into a profit center for the newspaper?
We've been asked
Can
that
you
before.
subscribe, sell, or license that very thing to a newspaper in Texas, universities?
Yeah. I was asked that before once, and I said, yes, it is possible. Let's hire some people and make it happen. I don't know. Yeah, it's possible.
I'll say this: if there were something and you wanted to use code that we had written, I'm sure, like that particular visualization, I know that the code was built in a way that you could rip it out and let somebody else use it. Actually, the truth is that the serious, the biggest, hardest piece of that is the puzzle map, and the sort of silly, very silly actually, code that I wrote to extract the centers from the SVG and get them back out in the new positions that they were in, because the sizing is really easy, but the moving every county has to be moved individually into the new spot. And so ultimately the crazy thing about that map is that it does have 254 XY, that take 254 XY coordinates.
And it's silly code. I read it and I just cracked out.
A lot of stuff that we do, and a lot of stuff that Daniel does, in newsrooms in general, is open source.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the tools that we use were written by somebody from the New York Times or somewhere else. So we're kind of all in this game together. We're competing with each other. It's nice to be able to share tools.
But you might, I don't know, see if you need a summer intern. And
I think
what would be
maybe
simplest would be if you're providing the service. Someone who gives you data, you have someone part-time maybe who plots it, sells it to them.
Journalists do incredible things, and I think that when you were asking about trends, I think like the next thing is actually using visualization and things like that for profit, for revenue generation, and that's not going to come from journalists. That's going to come from the private sector. That's going to come from businesses finding a way to do that. And it all hits to the issue that the expectation that everything, all the amazing things that journalists do and pour a lot of resources into are free. And the expectation is it should be free. If it's not free, then a lot of people get pissed off. And so that's the crux of the problem, is trying to find a way to generate enough revenue to more than equal the amount of
time and effort it takes. And that's why Michael talks about doing as much as he can, as quickly as he can, because that's the reality you're sitting in.
And we're already partners with McClatchy Tribune, which is now Tribune News Service, and they have these giant wire services where everyone contributes and they share. And a lot of the national graphics that we do are done by staff in Los Angeles or staff in Chicago, and where these stories are happening. So we do share these things a lot. The profit thing, that's a whole different.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. For me, it would be easier to just give it to you than to charge you money for it. In all seriousness, it would if somebody wanted, it's not worth the company's time to. I hate to say this, but the truth is, because of the way we're set up, there are so many people involved that it would cost us more to make money off of it than it would to just give it to people.
There's a lot of truth in that.
I have a couple of projects that I've worked on that have involved the business side of our company, and the fact of the matter is that I'll go out of my company into a good friend who for a long time worked at the New York Times, and what he discovered is that at the New York Times, an idea that doesn't generate $1 million in revenue is too hard for them to deal with because it's too small. Not because there's not money to be made, not because they wouldn't like to make $500,000, but because the way their processes are set up, it's not $1 million with Dallas. I'll tell you right now. We will definitely go across the street from it. At the New York Times, literally, they're set up in such a way that if you have a business idea that isn't $1 million in revenue, they really, it will cost them more. It will cost them more money to execute it than they will make off of it, because that's the scale that they're operating in. Now, it's a terrible way to design an organization. It's part of the reasons that a lot of newspapers are faring so poorly. Is that but at the time that these companies came to be, it was a reasonable approach because there were so many people willing to give us so much money to advertise. So I don't know. It's maybe a little bit too much editorialization, but the fact of the matter is that for us, if it doesn't involve selling advertising or selling subscriptions to newspapers, we don't have to do it. I wish that weren't true.
What other questions? Well, it's been a pleasure. If anybody has anything, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have one question. Sort of unrelated to what we've been talking about. For y'all in your presentation, you talked time is money and what it really takes to turn something around in a timely fashion. I work in city government, so it doesn't. But that concept, how much is this going to cost? Internally isn't really a factor. We're sort of in the process right now, so we're moving between the static, hand-drawn, graphic to more of an interactive, data-driven page. But I know I'm hoping from some of you, or at least you know the history, at some point you had to have the discussion or the conversation with somebody that says, this stuff takes time. What you all can produce now in 4 hours probably took you a whole lot longer before that. How did you have that conversation?
Not all of this stuff took 4 hours to do.
No, we still have these conversations.
Yeah, like I said, this project was 6 weeks. I mean, and we had to persuade me and my colleague John McClure, who are based on the investigative projects team. So doing something about election results was actually off. I mean, essentially, good thing about being on the investigative projects team in a newspaper, we're kind of like city government. We can do whatever we want for as long as we want. Somebody else is paying the bills for it. So these guys are working to turn stuff around for the newspaper every day, and I'm just sitting back and thinking good thoughts. But the advantage of being in that part of the newspaper is that when we had this idea and we said we want to go spend 6 weeks doing this, we only had to convince one guy, our boss, that was worth doing, and he basically said, like, well, it better be good, and we were able to do that. think, and that becomes, I guess, for John, I know that there's a lot of things that you work on the side for a long time.
So, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do is special presentation story design. And we have some templates set up that it's pre-written code that you just plug in a block of code. The CSS is already written, and you can get a decent-looking story design, and you may spend a day on it. But my bosses, who, like these guys have said, want flashy things, they know if you want something that's nicer, you've got to give me a week to work on it, or 2 weeks to work on it. So they, some of our higher up bosses know that it's a sliding scale. What you get out depends on how much time you get to put into it.
It's really more about managing that expectation.
Right.
We've sold like this is what we should be doing, and everybody's around him. Yeah, that's the coolest thing ever, But then they're like, we need that tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, one of the and this is the problem of people. It all seems like magic, and so they don't understand. They don't understand why is that harder than that, because it all just seems like
magic robots instead of computers that are doing that.
Yeah, and so I mean, it is sort of educating, and then it's sometimes saying like, look, we're going to do this. It's going to take 6 weeks, but in the case of this, next time, it's not going to take 6 weeks. Next year, we can spend some time doing other stuff, but this is done. If we were doing this for the Secretary of State's office instead of the Dallas Morning News, we could absolutely feed every election result from every election in Texas history ever into this from now and forever, and it would work. Because it's just putting more data in, and I think that's one of the selling points to explain to people is if you give us the time to do this right, then we can build something that is going to have shelf life, that is going to be able to be used again and again. And that's, it's one way to sell it and explain it. It's like, we can do it, it's faster to make one map than it is to make a system for making maps. But once you've built a system for making maps, it becomes a lot faster to make the one map again.
Any other questions?
I actually forgot to make an announcement. We have a meetup for Postgres. If you know, this is the open source user database. So we had this for like 2 years now. But we hold a meeting right on, what is Improving the Price of Data Stowaway? And we do it every first Wednesday. So next Wednesday we will have a meetup, and the topic will be JSON serialization for Postgres.
Oh, I'm going to be out of town.
Actually, I'm going to be out of town, but I joined.
No, I'm not!
I joined remote. So I will be joining, but I'll be doing. I'm the organizer, but the presenter will be there. And like I said, we've been holding the meeting every first Wednesday. We've been doing that for as long as 2 years now.
More questions?
I've been fascinated by this graphic.
Really cool. Well, first, thank you guys for volunteering your time. We truly appreciate your insights, and certainly everyone come take a look at what Mary has created over here. She's done a fabulous job over here. We're going to take some pictures, and I'm going to put that up on the meetup site as well, so you guys can see it later.
What tools did you use for that?
Talk about your software tools.
My soft hands and my soft hands.
And wetware.
Yep. So our next event is March 25th. So you can put that on your calendars. You can RSVP on the meetup site. And please leave comments, reviews, add the discussion on the meetup site. And guys, if you have events like any of those, please post those in the comments as well. So again, thank you very much, guys. We appreciate it. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I don't know. I think it was one of those. You might be interested in these meetups. There were 4 or 5. Police officers. Yeah. Oh, it's like, but I got better late than never.
Thank you.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, well, that's the way. Yeah, I've worked since I